Hello everyone and welcome back. You know those labels or panels that begin with the words, "Did you know that?" They can be quite fun, but they are often very generic and sometimes a bit school-like, I find. And I think the biggest problem I have with them is that they start with a fact rather than putting focus on visitors' attention. A strong opening should deliver much more than facts. It should direct attention. And really, your opening line is what is setting your whole interpretive tone for your storytelling. So I thought we should dive into 3 different ways of starting a story and getting people's attention. As always, if you like these videos, subscribe to the channel, like the video, add your comments below. Please show your own examples. It would be lovely to see. And let's dive into these. First of all, start with the human stake. In other words, what was at risk, what was needed, what was decided, or what mattered to someone here. So instead of saying, "Did you know that rationing affected everyday meals?" you could say, "For many families, this small book decided what dinner looked like." And then you might display a rationing book, for example. Instead of saying, "Did you know many migrants traveled with very few belongings?" you could say, "Everything this family could carry had to fit inside one trunk." Instead of saying, "Did you know this tool was used every day?" you could say, "This tool was part of someone's daily survival." Now, this kind of opening works because it gives visitors a reason to care before you give them more detail. It immediately places the object inside a human life. So what you're doing when you are focusing on the human stake is you're effectively asking what mattered, what was at risk, why should visitors care? That's a very effective opening. Another option is start with a close observation. This means you direct the visitor's eye to one visible detail before you explain anything else. So for example, look at the worn edge of this spoon. Notice how uneven the stitching is here. See the crack running through the glaze. Look at how small this bead is. Imagine loosening it. Now, these kind of openings are useful because they get visitors looking actively. You are literally zooming in on a detail instead of the object itself, rather than just reading passively, rather than visitors just reading a label passively. It tells visitors where to focus. And once they have noticed something for themselves, the interpretation tends to land more strongly because suddenly there is a detail about this object. This is not just a spoon. This is a spoon where something happened. So you're not just giving information, you're guiding attention. And what happens when you are using close observation is that you tell visitors exactly where to look. You start with a visible detail, and looking comes before explaining. They are actively doing something before you start telling them anything else. The third one is start with tension or a contrast. That means opening with something unexpected, slightly contradictory, or curious. So for example, it looks ordinary, but it once carried enormous value. This room tells its story through what is missing. It seems decorative, but it was built for hard use. This object was meant to last, yet it survives by chance. This kind of opening works because contrast creates curiosity. It gives the visitor a small puzzle to resolve. It suggests that there is more here than first appears. And you are inviting visitors to explore that. And that is often exactly what good interpretation does. It helps people see beyond the obvious. So what you're doing when you are creating tension or contrast is you start with something unexpected, you immediately create curiosity, and you invite visitors to resolve the puzzle or to explore for themselves. So if you want a stronger opening than "Did you know that?", try one of these. Start with the human stake or start with a close observation. This is the second one. It's wonderful, by the way, if you have a really interesting object, but it might not look much visually. It might not draw much attention to itself, but it has a strong story. So it's wonderful to start with that little detail observation. Or the third one, start with tension or contrast. And remember, a strong opening should really do more than just deliver a fact. It should direct attention. And because in the end, the opening line is what sets the entire interpretive tone of your story. And I often find that I actually remember a fact for much longer, and also in a stronger way when I leave a place, if I have been presented with one of these openings instead of just the good old usual, did you know that? And you see it in many places, the did you know that sentence. But the thing is, it's very quickly out of your mind as well. So try one of these instead. See what it does to your interpretation, to your tone of voice, to your storytelling, and how visitors react and engage with it. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully see you in the next video.